Hi there. So this video will go into my autistic videos playlist because I've got a few discrete points to share with you about my experience of living with autism. And the first thing is something that I've worked out very recently, as in today and yesterday. So over the 2 days I worked out something about my mornings. And in my courier videos I often say that I find it hard to get awake in the mornings because I'm more of a nighttime person. But I've realised it's actually a bit more than that now. And it's not about being in the mornings, it's not about being awake or not, because that's one aspect of it. Actually, I've realised that I just do not want noise and conversation in the morning. Even when I'm awake and I'm ready to approach the day, I'm just not prepared and not really up for having conversations. I'm very sensitive to noise, and I think what I've worked out is I just need to be left alone so that I can sort of bring myself into the working day or the normal day with a bit more of a transition from just waking up, getting up and getting sort of to your usual physical preparation. I would see it as being a mental preparation that I'd never really realised before, that I need to have that quiet time and that alone time just to get myself on an even keel. And I do find engaging in conversations or having lots of background noise more difficult to deal with in the mornings. And so when I say in the mornings, I sort of mean between waking up and let's say 11 o'clock in the morning. So a couple of hours you can just do with having not very much going on. But obviously that's not very easy when you're living with somebody who has just been asleep and wants to have conversations. Which brings me to my second point, which is it doesn't happen very often, but I've definitely recognised it recently where I'm feeling particularly autistic, in that the things that I can usually deal with quite easily, don't get overwhelming, sort of they exist, but they're not really things that kind of get too bad. They can, in certain situations, become too much just because I'm in the wrong, I don't know, mood or not resilient enough. And to be fair, it doesn't happen very often, but I recognised the other day that I was feeling more affected by it than usual. And it didn't last very long, it probably lasted about an hour or so. But I think recognising when my autism is having more of an effect on my mood or my ability to cope is really useful. And not trying to hide that or ignore it, but accept it and acknowledge it and more importantly, communicate it. So communication is my next point. I think that I've noticed that online, on YouTube, there's a lot more autistic people doing videos to explain what autism is like. And it might just be that they're the things that come up on my feed because I've showed an interest in it. But I'm really pleased that there is an avenue for people to explain their autism. And we are all different as people, you know, as neurotypical people and as neurodivergent people, we're all different from each other. So having as many different stories or examples of how an autistic life is like for somebody, or how they display it, or how they're affected by it, I think would go a long way to educating all of us about an aspect of what people are dealing with. And I'm really pleased that YouTube and other things like that, I mean, I only use YouTube, but there'll be other social media which also allow people to express themselves and explain themselves. And there's always going to be people that will dismiss it and not, will just never engage and listen. But for most people who've got some sort of empathy, having that extra level of communication, I think, is going to be nothing but good. And it also helps people like myself who don't have the same sort of symptoms. I can sort of see, I can see where that's coming from. I have a lot of empathy for people with autism who are on the videos, despite them having very different kinds of problems than I have. And it does sort of make you feel less alone. Autism is a spectrum. There'll be people on the spectrum who are debilitated and can't do very much, can't live independently. There'll be people that you wouldn't even know had it. And then there's people along the whole spectrum from one end to the other. And it's just good to understand that we are all coping with our own difficulties, be that autism or other things, depression or physical problems or relationship problems. We all have things to deal with, and the better we understand each other, the better the world will be, in my view. So autism is something that I've seen. I'm delighted. I'm personally delighted to have YouTube and have autistic people on there, because I remember growing up not having a clue what autism was. I was a teacher, and I only came across autism because when I was teaching, I had to come across it there. But it's very much a theoretical situation. If I hadn't been a teacher, I would never have really ever come across it. So we've come on leaps and bounds in the last 40 years in our understanding and acceptance of autism, and they can only keep getting better. And then the next point about this communication is, I am mindful that when I kind of share with either yourselves or with people in real life how autism and autistic mind affects me, I am mindful that it might sound like moaning, and I'm really fearful that I shouldn't be doing that. I shouldn't be trying to become a special case. I'm really aware that we all have our own problems, but these are my problems, and I'm trying to express them so people around me and people on YouTube understand better. But it might come across to you as just someone whinging about little stuff that doesn't have make much difference. And I try not to make it sound like that, but I'm aware that it could be like that. So this brings me now to the next thing I've heard. I've only heard it directly once, but it really irritated me the first time I heard it. I've heard it in other contexts as well, and that's people saying everyone's a little bit autistic. Well, I don't think that's true. I think that's a lack of understanding. I think there is a spectrum of autism and non-autism, absolutely, but it doesn't mean that everyone has a bit of autism in it. You might feel some of the symptoms that an autistic person feels once in a while. It doesn't mean you feel them in a way that is intrusive or consistent, or even low-level autistic traits can become difficult to deal with in the wrong circumstance. It's a bit like, I think, people saying everyone's a little bit fat, everyone's a little bit depressed. It just diminishes the thing that actually exists for people. And it comes from, I think, a lack of understanding and a need to kind of not feel that your life is any worse than anyone else's. It's a very irritating thing to say, and I would avoid saying that to people if they disclose to you that they're autistic. Because disclosing that you're autistic is not an easy thing to say. It might be easier now than it was in the past, maybe, but it's not that easy, particularly if someone looks like, if it comes, they're neurotypical. I mean, I'm now wearing a badge which I really quite like. It's a multicoloured infinity badge which says define normal. Next point I want to say is, one of the things that I struggle with a lot personally is when people start to say something without the context, because they're thinking about something in their head, then they suddenly relate a question or a comment to what they're thinking about without putting the right context to it. Because I'm not in their head, I don't know what they're thinking about. And even if we're having a conversation about something and you think, a minute later you have a pause, a minute later you refer to something back in the conversation, unless you specifically say, oh, remember we talked about this, you have to link it back to something that is tangible. Otherwise, I'm scrabbling around trying to think, what on earth are you talking about? Is this a question? Is it a response? I do not know where you're coming from, and it can be very stressful trying to work out what sort of response to give somebody when they say something out of the blue, from my perspective, without the context about what's going on. Next, I would like to talk about my understanding of memory, and my memory in particular. I've always been aware that I've had quite a poor memory, because I find it very difficult to recall specific words in a conversation, like from the day before or even sort of an hour before on the same day. I find it very difficult to remember tasks that I meant to do, and I've really struggled with understanding that, and I think I now know what's going on. Because it's not like I don't have a good memory for some things. And I was trying to work out, why do I remember some things very easily, but other things that other people find important, not at all, or very poorly. And I think this is what's going on in my head. So let's say I'm talking to somebody and they say, don't forget we're going out next Tuesday. Let's say today is Saturday. Then I will be actively listening to that person. I will hear what they're saying, and I'll understand what they're saying. And I'll know it's important to remember that we're going out next Tuesday. And I'll find out the time and the place. And what I do now is I immediately write that down in my calendar, because I know that within 5 minutes I will forget that. And when it's something like appointments or meeting someone or telephone calls, it's really easy, because you can put it into your Google Calendar to remind yourself about that without too much effort. Let's say somebody says, remember, I don't like fish. Now, I'm not going to have any cues to remind me that someone doesn't like fish. And so I'll have to find some other way of remembering that fact. And the way that I have found that I can learn those sort of facts, or those sort of things to remember, is I need to have something repeated to me in a slightly different context or slightly different manner 3 times. And on the 3rd time, it sticks in my memory. So it could be a date, it could be a preference, it could be someone's, anything at all. I can remember stuff, but it has to be reinforced 3 times. The first time, then 2 reminders. And it's a really effective way of me remembering important things. Now, when I say important things, I mean important things to other people. Because things that are important to me, I might only need to be reminded once. Or I might just remember them because they're important to me. They stick out. When I first think of them, I think I remember that because it's important. I think what's going on here is when I receive some input, some information, it's just one of a multitude of bits of information I'm receiving. It could be that my nose is itching, or there's a sound that's bugging me, or I can't quite see the time, so what time is it? All the things that aren't actually important, they have an equal waiting when they first come into my head. So every thought that I have, everything that I hear and listen to, it all has the same importance in my brain. And the only way of me dealing with that, I think, is that my brain has decided just forget everything unless you know it's important. So I think I tend to find stuff that I think is important easy to remember, and I have to remind myself with some sort of technique the things that I don't think are important but other people do. So knowing someone doesn't like fish is important to them. It wouldn't matter to me unless I need to sort of be with that person again. And it's such an irregular thing, such a knowable thing. You can't see it, you can't remember it there's no cues you get from seeing it. So the idea that I remember someone doesn't like fish just gets forgotten, just like I forget I need to know the time, or I forget when I've scratched my nose I've got an itch. Or if I remove myself from a room, that noise isn't bugging me anymore. So all those memories that as humans we can rank in the moment, I don't think my brain is able to rank stuff internally without some sort of external cue. And so I think my memory is actually quite good. It's just knowing what to remember. And if I was to remember actually everything I think about, it would be very overwhelming very quickly. And I think I might have almost the opposite of a photographic memory. So there would be people who would read something once and remember it, for a long time or forever. I don't have that. I read something once and I forget about it. And that makes learning new stuff quite difficult. It makes it quite hard for me to learn things quickly. I can learn new skills, I can learn new information, but it either has to have a high importance to me or a high interest to me, and or it needs to be repeated up to 3 times for me to remember something. So learning stuff is quite cumbersome for me. I like learning new things. I enjoy having knowledge, but it's not simple. It's not simple as reading something once and then taking it all in. It just doesn't work that way for me. So that's my understanding of how my memory works, and it does mean that I have a bit of a reputation for having a bad memory. And to be fair, I think I have a bad memory, but now I'm thinking, oh, maybe you don't. Maybe you just have a poorly defined way of remembering what's important, which is different, I think. And then finally, I wanted to give you an example in the last month where I was in a situation and I just chose to not pretend not to be autistic, and it was really liberating. The context was I was in a medical appointment for my PD. It was one of the first appointments I went to, and I had my partner with me, so she gave me kind of the confidence to be myself. She didn't do anything or say anything, she just was in the room, so I knew that she would understand why I was behaving differently. And it started off really, I was just quite fed up with pretending that I don't have these intrusive thoughts. So at one point during the session, the lady who was dealing with me dropped a tissue on the floor, and she couldn't pick it up because she was having to keep her hands clean. And usually I would sit there trying to ignore that tissue on the floor and get more and more distracted by it and feeling I can't pick it up. It's really bothering me, I can't pick it up, and then wondering, can they see that I'm bothered by this? What do they think about me? Can they see I'm reacting to it? Which gets into a whole cycle of being uncomfortable and being anxious. So on this occasion I left it for about 30 seconds and I thought, sod this. I got up, picked it up and put it in the bin. And that one act of rebellion in my mind, going against what I thought was the social norms, just gave me the confidence to do it for the rest of the session. And it felt, as I said, liberating. Another example was I was given a form to fill out like a standard sort of form where you have your details and a few personal questions. And usually I would just fill that in as quickly as possible. I wouldn't really read the context of the form. I would just fill it out, sign it, and give it back. And I would feel conscious about the time it took me to do it. On this occasion, there were elements of the form that I didn't like. It was poorly laid out. So the questions were, in my mind, ambiguous and hard to understand. And so rather than me sort of getting some anxiety about this is stressing me out, but I can't say anything, I just said something. I said, this is a bad form. Look, this should be on the next page. It had a title on the bottom of page 2 for the questions on page 3. And I thought, why don't you just page break here and have it laid out much more sensibly. And also, because I read the actual form rather than just signing the bits I had to sign and filling out the bits I had to fill out, I could see that at the top of the form was a Leicester Hospital form, and I was actually at the time in Lincoln Hospital. And so I realised that the dialysis I was having was actually under Leicester Hospital, not Lincoln. And I was at like a satellite clinic for Leicester. And so that bit of understanding, that knowledge, was just comforting, that I realised, this makes a few things make sense. So why I went to Leicester to have my operation, it makes sense now. So I felt that I was able to express my dissatisfaction. I was doing it kind of to nobody. I was making sure the nurse heard me, but I was also aware that she had nothing to do with that form. So it was nothing to do. She couldn't change it. She was just doing her job. So I wasn't necessarily trying to criticise anyone in the room, but it might have come across that way. But the point is, I stopped trying to pretend that the crappy form didn't bother me, and by saying it out loud, I just felt like I'm being myself. I am being actually myself for really one of the first time. This is in public, sorry. I'm often myself at home. I'm able to be myself at home because my partner is able to do that. But in public, I just don't do those things. Since that point, that was about a month ago, I haven't done it again since then, because I'm just really mindful that behaving like that can come across as being rude or being a bit of a jerk, and I don't think my comfort about being myself trumps other people's comfort about feeling implicitly criticised. But it just was a good experiment to realise how much of my life I actually do hide when I'm in public. And I'm not going to change what I do in public now, because I think my public persona is, a polite, respectful, person, which that's who I want to be. I want to be that person. I want to be, likeable and pleasant and polite. But being autistic in public, I think, is fraught with being seen as being rude or aggressive, or particularly where I am, I don't have any obvious autistic signs. So if I say stuff like that, this form is rubbish, it's bound to be taken as being a neurotypical person just being rude, and obviously I'd rather avoid that. But it was just an interesting experiment, and I could only do it because my partner was there and she gave me the confidence just to be myself, because I knew that she knew what I was doing even without telling her. And she was proud of me for sort of being myself, and I was on a bit of a high after that. But like I said, I haven't done it since, and whether I'll do it again I don't know, but I'll have to be in the right mood, I think, to do that. But it just gave me a window into what it might be like to live just completely as I am. And maybe the answer is I can, but not in public. Okay, cheers. Hi there, just a quick update on my autistic thinking. And basically it was to sort of put it into context somewhat. What I do on my channel is I share my perceptions and perspectives of what it's like to communicate and to live with autistic traits, or to live with autism. And everyone who has autism is different and unique, as with other sorts of neurodivergent issues. So I'm not trying to say that I've got it the same as anybody else, or I think the same as anyone else. Clearly that's nonsense. All I can do is share openly and honestly what I have learned about myself. And in this video I just want to sort of shout out for those people that have a more intrusive autistic mind than I do. You have to have a lot more support or a lot more help to live, and I don't really need that level of support. I don't need help from the state to deal with my autism. I don't really need anyone's support other than the understanding of the people that know me, who are close to me, my friends and close family who understand what autism is. And there's some family that would never understand or accept what it's like in my head, and they would be of the older generation who I would not even consider trying to explain to them what it's like, because they would not have a clue how to react or what to think about it, which I think is a shame. It does mean there's a bit of a barrier between how I communicate in my ideal world and how I communicate to those people. But the point is, all I need is self-understanding so that I can communicate more effectively and more clearly to people around me. And I need those people to understand a bit about what it's like, so that when I explain what it's like for me or what I want to do differently, they understand what's going on. I do not need any other interventions. I am aware that other people need more support than I need to prosper with their autistic brain. So please don't take these videos as being poor old me, oh no, boo-hoo. It certainly isn't meant in that way. It's definitely meant to be a revelatory, sharing experience and sort of a knowledge and understanding. And it's done really from a place of positivity and glad that I'm actually understanding myself better. And I feel very lucky that I don't have to, I feel very lucky that I can still function, in the normal world without too much problems. My problems are primarily to do with my mental health when it comes to my autistic brain, not my physical or my financial well-being.